So, welcome to Sabbath Collective, a community of people interested in celebrating the Sabbath and pursuing God through a Hebraic worldview of the Bible. Purim synchronicity is the topic tonight. The longer you're alive on this planet, the more most of us who have the eyes to see recognize that life is really sprinkled with unusual coincidences that others may really not even notice. Or if they do, sometimes those are just often dismissed. Carl Jung observed that events can have, quote, meaningful coincidences if they occur with no causal relationship, yet seem to be meaningfully related. In a well-known essay, he named the phenomenon synchronicity. And to those of us who believe that Yahweh is present and at work in the world, these small and sometimes large synchronistic events are really subtle reminders that there is a pattern in the universe. And these patterns are evidence of an ultimate plan. Now, there are several people groups. Hey, Lisa, good to see you. Phoebe, great to have you. Hey, Mikkel. Don't know if you're back in New York, Mikkel, now, but good to have you with us. Shabbat Shalom. So there are several people groups that have their own words for the concept of synchronicity. And certainly the Jewish people seem to be very in tune to this concept. Elie Wiesel says, in Jewish history, there are no coincidences. And this is really something that most people are very aware of. We do not create and fulfill our visions in autonomy. Rather, we are participants in their unfolding. And we have to always keep an eye out on and never forget that we're really not alone on this planet. And so even when we have our own visions, we participate in the fulfilling of these visions. Synchronicity is a series of tipping points on that path, on our journey. And we spoke when we first got in to this series on vision, we spoke of this high beta brainwave, this flight or fight kind of state. Our focus narrows in on survival when we're in this state of high stress, high beta brainwave. We get really focused, and the whole body enables us to escape danger. Now, that's actually by design, but it's not a good state to live in chronically, as we learned. High beta is not a time where we digest our food. In fact, a lot of times when people get really scared or really in flight or fight, they kind of eliminate themselves in their pants. And that's actually because your body just is not interested in working in digestion right then. It's dumping everything so that you can be quick. It doesn't work on immunity. Your whole immune system shuts down when you're in high beta brain activity. Because why do you need to fight off a cold if a tiger is about to eat you? It also, in high beta, as we talked about, stops connection. Connection with things around us, connections with people. We disconnect and it just becomes us and the world and our escape, or how are we going to fight. And also in high stress, we stop all creation because of course we're not going to be creative at that time. It's a time to fight or to run. And interestingly enough, when we're really under stress, two really important things happen. Well, scientists say more than two, but I just want to talk about two really important things tonight that happens when we're in this state of high beta or high stress. And these are consequences of stress. The first thing we see is that we can't focus on multiple things. And I think we all know that when we're in high stress, we can't multitask well. But what I'm talking about is you can't even recognize that the phone is ringing if you're on the computer in a deadline, or that something's boiling over on the stove. I mean, you literally can't focus on multiple things when you're in stress. Anything other than that one thing that you're focused on is considered a distraction. Right away, you go to a distraction. And you can even view it as an enemy, including your partner, your children even. I remember before I got a handle on this, when my kids were little, and I would be working on maybe preparing a teaching, and I was always, it was always urgent time back then. And the kids were little, they were toddlers, they would come, toddling into my office and say, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." And my first reaction would be, what is it now that's interrupting me? My own kids became a distraction because I'm in high beta brain activity. I'm only focusing on one thing, and it's impossible for me to focus on anything else. Fortunately, I got a handle on that fairly quick. Your family member can become your enemy. Your friends, that creative project that's sitting untouched in the corner of your room, because you can't focus on more than one thing. And that's problematic when we talk about what we're talking about tonight. The second thing that we see is we can't detect patterns. And for those of you who've been walking with us for a while, one of the big things I talk about really frequently is recognizing patterns. We recognize patterns in Scripture. Where have I heard this before? Where have I seen this word? We recognize patterns in our own life. But when we're in high beta brain activity, high stress, we cannot detect patterns. How can we? Seeing patterns is a big picture view, and it requires us to be in the present moment. And stress lifts us out of that big picture and puts us right down into that narrow vision, which all means living in high beta won't allow us to make connections and observe any synchronicities. Yesterday was Purim. And Andy, good to see you. Great to have you with us. And in this month, which is the month of Adar, it is said that coincidences are more meaningfully obvious. So Adar is said to be the month of obvious and meaningful coincidences, even more so than normal. For instance, a few Adars ago, a synchronicity emerged from a book about Joseph Stalin. And it related that after the 1953 doctors plot, now for those of you history people, you may remember this, there was an alleged conspiracy of prominent, predominantly Jewish Soviet medical specialists that were accused of plotting to murder government and party officials. And the prevailing opinion is that Stalin actually intended to use the resulting doctor's trial to launch a massive purge. Similar to like Nero blaming Christians for the fire in Rome, right? And oh, hello, we kind of have that same thing today, don't we? All kinds of different people groups get blamed for these huge problems, right? They're a threat to us in some way. So again, there's nothing new under the sun. So Stalin actually goes to vilify this group of Christian or of Jewish doctors and says they're an enemy to the state. And Stalin ordered the construction of 4 giant prison camps in Siberia. And then, and I'm quoting, apparently, as a New York Times article commenting on the book puts it, in preparation for a second Great Terror, this time directed at the millions of Soviet citizens of Jewish descent. So let's get the vision here. Stalin is planning on taking millions of Jewish people and using this doctor trial as the way he's going to do it and put them in this place of horror. However, and again, we're talking about synchronicity. 2 weeks later, Stalin took suddenly ill at a dinner party, and 4 days later it was actually announced that he had died. And his successor, Nikita Khrushchev, recounted how the dictator had gotten really hammered, I mean real drunk, at the dinner party, which ended in the early hours of March 1st, which on that particular year fell on the 14th of Adar, on Purim. Is that a meaningful coincidence? Is that a synchronicity? The holiday of Purim commemorates the salvation of the Jewish people in ancient Persia from Haman's plot to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, infants and women, in a single day. This is what we see as a synchronicity. The word Purim is not a Hebrew word, and it actually means lots, like how they toss it to know what to do. Melissa, great to see you. To know what to do. Like how you would, toss dice. And the holiday's name, actually, Purim, was from the story that we read in Esther 9:24. And again, this is an interesting verse, Esther 9:24. Because Haman, the enemy of the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had thrown pur, here's that word, that is to cast lots, to crush and destroy them. So from this verse, we get the name of this holiday, Purim, which is lots. Pur's symbolic meaning is when someone casts lots. And when they cast lots, what they're basically saying is it's beyond our control. They kind of surrender to forces greater than oneself, right? Tell me what to do. I'm going to cast the lots and the gods are going to tell me. And the holiday was named this since Haman had thrown lots to determine when he would carry out this really diabolical scheme he had that sort of sanctioned his act. So in other words, well, the gods are going to tell me when I can wipe out this population. And the Hebrew holiday today, in recent times, is actually celebrated by the Jewish people. They dress in costumes and wear masks that conceal their true identity. Meaning, again, just like Esther, you don't really know who that person is behind the mask. It's a story, the whole story of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. And I'm going to kind of point them out. Now, I'm not suggesting I'm going to get to them all, but when I say synchronicity, or when maybe you see a synchronicity, give me some sort of emoji, give me a thumbs up, like connect with me as I say it, or even if you see your own. By the way, I was going to get a little bell and ring it, but I decided against it because I thought it may be a tad bit annoying. I'm not sure. I think I made the right call. So instead, we're just going to rely on emojis, okay? So when you see one yourself, give me an emoji, and you can kind of write in the comments what's up with the synchronicity you see, or if you hear me say synchronicity, I'm going to be shouting out all the synchronicities. Remember, the meaningful coincidences in this story. So Purim connects to the story of Esther, and it begins with a big party. And Ahasuerus, the king of Persia, reigns over 127 kingdoms. And he recently conquered Babylonia, and part of the people who were conquered are the Jewish people who are now living in Babylon. So this is only 3 years into the king's reign. So Persia is kind of the new kid on the block, meaning they have something to prove. So King Ahasuerus, who oversees this giant empire, throws a party for all the servants to kind of connect everybody to himself. His advisors and all the political leaders come, and he wants to show off his glory. And this party goes on for 180 days, which is a long time to party, okay? And at the end of 180 days, he throws another party for 7 days. And this is a 7-day feast for all the people. The scripture says both great and small. So it's everybody. And there is just opulence in abundance. I don't even want to waste time getting into that. But it's just, hey, look at how much I have. And on the last day of the 7th feast, when his heart, scriptures tell us, was merry with wine, again, hammered, he decides he wants his wife, Vashti, to come and show her beauty off. And because Vashti apparently has a brain, I don't know about you, those of you who are women, I'm quite sure you wouldn't want to be parading yourself around people that have been partying for 187 days, right? So she has a brain and she declines. Now, synchronicity, hit me up. Synchronicity. We're going to see how this connects with the story later on. And for those of you who know the story, you're already going to be seeing the synchronicities even before I say them. This is a meaningful coincidence. So, one of his advisors say to the king now at this point, yeah, as an event producer, Melissa's saying even trying to manage that is terrifying. I know. Can you do you even imagine? Obviously, he had a lot of servants to take care of this. So one of his advisors say to the king, after Vashti declines the invitation, no, thank you, I won't be parading myself around your drunk friends. One of his advisors say, this is no bueno. She insulted the nation, and here we go, she's a threat to all men because of her opinionated ways. Ooh, boy. So he divorces her because Vashti has an opinion. He banishes her, and he sends out a decree for all wives in the land, you better listen to your husbands. It's a typical handmaid's tale, really. So the king's servants suggest, let's have a contest of sorts, where there's a search for young, good-looking virgins. You can't make this up, okay? This is mankind and its worst. To bring to the house for the harem, and out of that group would be where he would find his new wife. And surprise, surprise, Ahasuerus really likes the idea. So there was a man named Mordecai who was a Jew. And he had raised, and again, he was living in this land of Ahasuerus. And he had raised his uncle's daughter, Hadassah, or Esther, because her parents were dead. So Esther was among one of the women who were gathered for this group. Now again, hit me up, synchronicity. Hey Odane, great to see you. Randall, great to see you too. Synchronicity. Sorry, I keep coughing. So Esther here would pay a price, leaving her family. Now, this is not like a trip to the spa, like how some male Christian Western pastors describe it. She is taken from her family. She is put into a different location where she's either going to become part of a harem, or her best case scenario is she marries a king, a kind of dictator that she doesn't even know. So this synchronicity with Esther, she's paying a price to be part of this story. So she wins favor as she's coming into this situation with Haggai, who's the man overseeing all of the women. And he gives her all these extra natural cosmetics, and he gives her 7 women servants. And all these beauty treatments go on for a year. And Esther trusts Haggai, and he uses the makeup, she uses the makeup just like he advises her, which is a little bit more natural. And she also listens to her uncle's advice as well, and does not reveal she's a Jew. Now, hit me up again with synchronicities. Let me see your thumbs. Let me see your heart. Let me see whatever emoji you want to use for synchronicity. Here's another synchronicity. And you know the story, so you know why this is a meaningful coincidence. Now, she wins the king's heart in this pageant, in this contest, and she becomes queen. And the crown is on her young Jewish head now. So she is concealed, again, the Purim mask, she is concealed, and she is in a place of great influence. Now, at the same time, there are 2 men that were angry with the king, and they plot to kill King Ahasuerus. And the assassination attempt is overheard by Mordecai. Again, hit me up. Here's another synchronicity. Okay? And he tells Hadassah, Esther, and she tells the king. By the way, I don't see any thumbs up, and I'm serious about the thumbs up or the hearts or the emoji. Hit me up when I say synchronicity or when you see it yourself, because I want for us to really notice how many there are. So again, synchronicity. So the assassination is overheard by Mordecai. He tells Hadassah, Esther, and she tells the king. And the attempt then is exposed, the assassination attempt, and the whole thing is recorded in this book called the Book of Records. So Mordecai is not at the time rewarded for this, but it's recorded in this book of records. And again, another synchronicity. Okay, so now there's a decree to bow down to Haman, because Haman, hey Nandi, great to see you, honey, good to have you join us, because Haman is really full of himself. He loves him some Haman, okay? He wants everybody to bow down to him, and the king makes this, he's the king's advisor, he's second in command, and they make this decree, everybody needs to bow down to Haman. And then in Esther 3:2, we read, all the king's servants at the king's gate. And again, when I say handmaid's tale, this is a handmaid's tale here in the story of Esther. So it says in Esther 3:2, all the king's servants at the king's gate would kneel and bow down before Haman, because the king had so ordered. But Mordecai would neither kneel nor bow down to him. And verse 5 says, Haman was furious when he saw that Mordecai was not kneeling and bowing down to him. Oh, hello. Political leaders still seemed, insecure little men still seem to get pissed when you don't bow down and worship at them as the altar, don't they? Again, nothing new under the sun. However, on learning what people Mordecai belonged to, the text says in verse 5, it seemed to him a waste to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Rather, he decided to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole of Ahasuerus' kingdom. In the first month, the month of Nisan, in the 12th month of Ahasuerus, they began throwing pur. That is, they cast lots before Haman every day and every month until the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to Ahasuerus, there is a particular people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are very different from those of every other people. Well, that's true, right? Let me push pause there. That's true. Moreover, Haman goes on to the king, they don't observe the king's laws. And actually, that was false. That's a lie. He goes on, it doesn't befit the king to tolerate them. If it please the king, have a decree written for their destruction, and I will hand over 330 tons of silver to the officials in charge of the king's affairs to deposit in the royal treasury. Oh man, that sounds like special interest groups, doesn't it? Hey, that sounds like the same kind of people that take out the politicians and fly them around in private jets, and they okay their pharmaceuticals, or they okay their toxins that they want to put in the land, or they okay their new prisons that they want to open up and become rich in. Right? Same thing. Again, nothing changes. So Mordecai finds out about it, and he puts on sackcloth and ashes, which is a sign of mourning. And Esther sees him in the ashes, and she goes to him, and he tells Esther, you got to go tell the king about this, and you got to tell him who you are. And she says, I can't. I haven't even been called by the king for 30 days, and if I just go in unannounced, I could be beheaded, because that's the law. And again, this is a really serious situation that Esther finds herself in. And this text is really, really powerful. It's one of my favorite texts in Scripture. Mordecai says to this young girl who's afraid, but who's been put into this situation. Again, this is a meaningful coincidence, a synchronicity. Don't suppose that merely because you happen to be in the royal place, you will escape any more than the other Jews. For if you fail to speak up now, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from a different direction. But you and your father's family will perish. Who knows whether you didn't come into your royal position precisely for such a time as this? Again, another synchronicity. Give me a thumbs up. What does he say here? Abstention is not an option. You have to choose. And we see this today. Mordecai is saying, if you keep silent, You are on Haman's side. You are responsible. You don't get to sit on the sidelines and say, well, this doesn't involve me. You have to speak up. You're on one side or you're on the other. And so she realizes, okay, yeah, that's the word. And she asks all of her people to fast for her for 3 days because she's going to risk her life now. This young woman who has been through a series of synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, has been put into this position of influence for such a time as this. And she's going to have to risk her life to do something about it, to save a people. She knows, again, she has to do something. And she wisely plans these banquets and invites the king and Haman. And so Haman comes home from from the first banquet, and he's really jazzed. And on the way home, because he's feeling full of himself, oh man, it was just the king and me, and it's the king, he's one, and I'm number two, and the queen invited me, and I'm somebody, and I deserve this respect, and all that he's thinking. And on the way home, he sees Mordecai, and he becomes infuriated because, again, this is the dude that won't bow to me. And he goes home, and he says to his wife and his friends, the text says that he says these words, I am the most powerful man on the planet next to the king. I have many sons, much wealth, yet none of it does me any good as long as I keep seeing Mordecai. Okay? He's got typical little man syndrome here. So he has gallows made to hang Mordecai. And I will tell you this, whenever you see an irrational hatred towards a people group, again, many of you are people of color, you certainly know what I'm talking about here. There's no real reason for this irrational hatred other than, wait, I'm pissed because I can't control you. And it becomes about their identities and the fact that they can't control another person. And Haman is just infatuated with Mordecai. He's obsessed with him. So he has gallows made to hang him. Meanwhile, the king has a sleepless night. So he asks to read the book of records that we talked about earlier. He just happens to be reading about Mordecai and how he saved his life by spoiling the assassination attempt. You remember we just talked about this. And he discovers that nothing was done for Mordecai. Boom, another synchronicity. The king sees someone standing at that moment. He can't sleep at night. He has the book of records read. He remembers, oh yeah, Mordecai did this to save my life and I never did anything to honor him. He stands up, he looks out the window, he sees someone standing outside in the courtyard, and he asks his servant who it is. It's Haman. And the king says, come on, let me ask you something, Haman. Let me ask you this. If I want to honor someone, what should I do? And Haman thinks, who else could the king be talking about besides me? I'm the one who deserves all the honor here. And he says back to the king, here's what you should do if you want to honor someone, thinking he's going to get honored himself. Get one of the king's horses, have the honored man ride on the horse around the kingdom and put on royal garments and put a crown on him and have a crier call out before him. Once again, hit me up with the synchronicity. The king says, great idea. Hey, Barika, good to see you. Yes, every situation under the sun without the same weighted consequences. Exactly right, Barika. That's exactly right. That verse has been attributed to other meanings. And this, as you point out, Barika, is exactly right. This was literal life or death that this young woman was facing. This was a big stand she was taking. So the king says to Haman, great idea. There's a guy, Mordecai, that I want to honor. Can you imagine? Haman thinks he's saying all this for him, and the king saying, great, I want to honor this guy Mordecai, who Haman obsessively hates. Now, he says, do this for him. So now Haman has to lead Mordecai through the kingdom, honoring him. So there's this great reversal here of power, and I just love the visual of this. And at the same time, when he's done mortifying himself, really, and honoring Mordecai, he goes home and he gets a warning from his wife. And she says, man, this doesn't look good for you. It looks like your days are numbered. And just as she's saying those words, there's a knock on the door. And it's the king's servants taking Haman to Esther's next banquet. Once again, we see this meaningful coincidence, synchronicity, which is all through Purim. She hosts the king and Haman, the queen does. The king asks her, I love you, baby. What can I do for you? Anything you want up to half my kingdom. He asks her again. But this time, she exposes the plot against the Jews, and the king wants to know, wait, who's initiating this? And Esther says, that dude right over there, it's Haman. And the king is so angry, he doesn't know how to deal with it, because here's his second in command, and here's his wife, who now he really loves and appreciates, and she's saying, this person has done all this bad things to my people. And he leaves the room. Now, once again, we see another meaningful coincidence. He's angry, he leaves the room, and as soon as he leaves the room, Haman realizes that he's in trouble, and he throws himself on the couch, as little men do, right? Because they don't actually have any courage. They just want to protect themselves, right? And they just want to protect their own entitlement. So he throws himself on her couch that Esther is sitting on, and he begins to make his case. And while he's doing that, the king walks back into the room. And the king sees this image of Esther on the couch. And usually when they sit on couches, they recline. And Haman also threw himself on the couch. And this is bad optics. And now the king perceives, not only are you unsafe for people, you're unsafe for my wife. And now you're trying to rape my wife. Once again, synchronicity. And a servant at that exact time says, look, there are gallows right in the back. Again, another meaningful. Jackie, great to see you, honey. Good to have you join us. Love you and miss you, and give love to Ed, too. A servant says, look, there are gallows in the back. Again, another meaningful coincidence, right? The gallows that were built to hang Mordecai. And the king now says, hang Haman on them. And Esther 7:10 says, so they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. This is just such a powerful imagery here. Esther 10:3 then says, after Haman is hanged, the enemy of all the Jewish people, and after Mordecai, who was meant to be the one killed, and was meant to be the one bowing to Haman, now we read in Esther 10:3, for Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus. So now the day the Jews were to be annihilated became the day of their deliverance and this celebration. The last name of the name of the holiday, Purim, means lots, which is chance or serendipity or coincidence, synchronicity. And it just so happens, as we go through this story, Vashti is gone, leaving an opening. And there's even deeper connections I can make in this. It just so happens Mordecai overheard the plot to kill the king and tells Esther, and Esther tells the king. It just so happens that the king can't sleep the night that Haman is coming to ask for Mordecai's life. It just so happens that Esther is chosen, that Esther gets favor with the servant, that Esther is made queen. It just so happens that Haman wants to plead his case, and the king interrupts and interprets that as a seduction of his wife. It just so happens that the gallows were prepared. The synchronicities of Purim were through Yahweh's assertion of his will for Israel. Yet, and here's the really cool thing, it was a series of miracles that wholly were clothed in humanity. Everything happened quite naturally. The synchronicities of Purim are a series of meaningful coincidences in which the natural order is not merely superseded, but rather a miracle in which humanity itself becomes the instrument of the meaningful coincidences. Those who are fully alive in all of life, we see these synchronicities in our day, these meaningful coincidences, if we'll recognize them all the time. We recognize synchronicities, these meaningful coincidences, as hidden catalysts or tipping points in the fulfillment of our heart's desires. And so, again, to sum up what we've been looking at with visions, God's given you the desires in your heart. You are working with the Lord to see these fulfilled. And at the same time, he's moving heaven and earth. And all these meaningful coincidences, these unrelated things come together to help you fulfill the heart's desire that he gave you. That's the power of the synchronicity. So we're going to close our time together tonight with the lighting of the Shavuos candles. And traditionally, the mothers of the home light the candles which connect us to the Sabbath light of peace and joy and unity. And then what she typically does traditionally is she encircles her hands around the lights 3 times, which is a gesture that means I'm welcoming in the Sabbath. The Lord is our light and our salvation. May his light be felt in this space as the enlightenment of truth and the radiance of joy. Amen. Keep your eyes open to see those meaningful coincidences of how he's moving in your life. Shabbat Shalom.